industries when we cannot just get basics like food on the table. Your thoughts on this and where we go wrong, because it's not that we don't produce enough food, it's not that we don't have enough arable land, but there's just something in our matrix that's not right, such that some do not even have food on their table.
I think I totally agree with the writer's observation that before we think of exporting food, exporting cash crops, we must think about feeding the nation. And I make two observations about that. Or three. One, we should be very lucky and very happy that when we are having COVID-19, there is some rain. So at least we are very lucky that people are going to get at least food growing and food crops growing, and people are going to get at least something to eat. But number two, when I was a small boy, I used to see a lot of agricultural extension officers coming to my father's farm. They would advise him how to improve production of food crops, how we would have better cows, better goats, better sheep, and so on. I don't know where they went. If you look at Kenya today, most of the food comes from small subsistence farmers that we don't think much about at the corporate or the national level. So I think it's a time from Raida's observation that we focused on those small farmers, the small-scale farmers, because they produce the bulk of the food. And number three, we must think about the supply chains. Because you may find that some people in County A are overproducing food, and people in County B are not having enough food. So we need to think about the supply chains. How do you move food from those areas that are more productive to those areas that are less productive? If you go to some parts of Nyandara or some parts of Nakuru today, and you want to buy potatoes, you'll be surprised how cheap they are. But when you come to the city, you find the same potatoes are very costly. So let's look at the whole picture, the whole network of how you get food-sufficient places, getting food to those places that are food deficit. Because at the end of the day, if you are hungry and you cannot feed yourself, the question of export doesn't arise.
Does not even arise. All right, let me come back to you, Leila, and maybe look at the question of traditional farming methods and mentality that we have maintained for a while, because you'll find, like Dr. Exen brings to the table, one of the issues that we may have is that because my relatives planted maize in a certain area, I shall continue to do that without necessarily checking whether that is the best crop for that area. Secondly, how can it lift me economically? Is there a place that we need to now possibly look at science and how we can employ science to guide us on better farming methods and techniques?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely think so. But a lot of the science, a lot of the knowledge is previously inherent, is already held amongst farmers. I think extension services and better funding extension services would go a long way in helping people understand sort of maybe what are more agroecological practices that wouldn't rely necessarily so much on artificial inputs, which might be expensive. And I can see that where this really would need to lead from is budget policies or national government taking the lead on what sort of things they are incentivizing. So for the longest time, the solution to food and nutrition insecurity has been the subsidy of synthetic fertilizers, or subsidies for synthetic fertilizers, as opposed to suggesting that, say we look at, how can people not be dependent on fertilizers for crop production? What are agroecological alternatives that might increase yields? And that we spoke a little bit about local manufacturing and improving this. Well, I think now is a really important opportunity to look at the local production of biopesticides and biocontrol products.
All right.
We have as a country a lot of, we default to the import of very harmful and toxic pesticides, plant protection products. These are being manufactured in Europe and China. Why are we not looking at, and I'm not suggesting that we now manufacture toxic chemicals in Kenya, but we have a huge resource of locally available natural materials. Natural materials like the neem or the neem tree or melia tree. And there are a few small companies or organizations doing this in Kenya at the moment. But why don't we look at, if we want to incentivize, if we want to disincentivize the use of toxic products, why don't we look at incentivizing the local manufacture of biocontrol products, which is good for the economy and good for Kenya's environment.
Absolutely.
So that would really be my view. And I just have one more comment on this, specifically given that we're looking at this desert locust invasion now. And we know that these locusts are going to be with us. History will show us for the next year, next 2 years. This is the pattern that it follows. So I would really hope to see that in this budget, we or at least a commitment from the government to say, okay, we're going to invest in monitoring and surveillance. Okay, let's talk specifically to this invasion now, which is critically important to be able to manage it now and going forward. But we also want to see how we can use biocontrol or biopesticide products from local manufacturers coming from, and improving that value chain that is coming from resources available in Kenya. And how we can use these ways to control a desert locust invasion.
All right, and I'll come back to you all. We'll come back to you in a bit, but let me cross over now to Henry Githaiga, who is our reporter, who is at our I&M studios in town, and of course, giving us an overview of what to expect this morning. Henry, just